So every organ system plays a role in maintaining homeostasis. Homeostasis is defined as the ability to maintain a stable internal environment even when the external environment is changing. In order for homeostasis to be maintained, you have to have communication within the body, and the two systems that are responsible for that are the nervous system, and that uses electrical impulses, and the second system is the endocrine system, which uses hormones. And we'll take a look at both of those systems later on the semester in greater detail. So we're going to look here at just the general components of the homeostatic control mechanisms. So you can see that you have three interdependent components. You have a receptor, a control center, and an effector. And what you want to think about when you're looking at a homeostatic control mechanism is that this balance is some variable that's set. And that'll probably make more sense to you as I go through this. Anytime you have an imbalance, so this variable, homeostasis is not being maintained, so if you dip below this variable or you go above this set variable, then you have an imbalance or homeostasis is not being maintained. So that imbalance is referred to as the stimulus. So the job of the receptor is to detect that there is a change in the variable, so that it detects the stimulus, and it's going to send input to the control center. And the control center's job is to then interpret this input and decide what the action that needs to be taken in order to bring the body back into homeostasis. So then the control center sends output to the effector, and the effector's job, so the effector is some body part, just like the receptor is a body part and the control center is a body part. The effector is going to be some body part that's going to carry out the instructions or the output that the control center just sent to it. And it's going to do something to bring the body back into homeostasis. One thing that I didn't mention that I'll mention now is the difference between afferent and efferent. So when the receptor detects the stimulus, that there's a change, the variable is no longer being maintained, it's going to send this input along an afferent pathway. An afferent with an A means going towards. Okay, then the control center interprets this input and decides what action is going to be taken, and it's going to send instructions or information, which is the output, and it's going to send the output via the efferent with an E pathway to the effector. So you can think of efferent going to the effector, or exiting the control center and going to the effector. We're going to take a look at the two different types of feedback mechanisms. You have a negative feedback mechanism and a positive feedback mechanism. The negative feedback mechanisms are the most common. So most homeostatic control mechanisms in the body are negative. And it's called a negative feedback mechanism because the output of the system shuts off the original stimulus or reduces its intensity. So we're going to take a look at a home heating system first, so a non-biological example, and then we'll take a look at a biological example. So first off, this is what I want you to do for that homework assignment. I'll explain that a little bit more in detail, but you want to kind of map out this feedback loop. So we're going with the example that's in your notes about your home heating system. So the variable, what you're looking to maintain, what's homeostasis, is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so that's what you want your room temperature to be, is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So when the room temperature drops below that, so say it drops to 67 degrees or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, that's the stimulus. So 68 degrees is no longer being maintained. You have an imbalance, or homeostasis is no longer being maintained. And the receptor, which in this case, your home heating system, is your thermostat. The receptor is going to detect that the room temperature is no longer 68 degrees. And it's going to send input along the afferent pathway to the control center. And the control center's job is to interpret this information. So the receptor in this example is the thermostat. The control center is also the thermostat in this example. So the control center's job is to interpret this input and decide what needs to happen. And it's then going to send out instructions, or what we call output, via the efferent pathway to the effector. And in this case, the effector is your radiator. So the control center sends this output, and it's going to turn the radiator on. So the response is your heat is turned on, and then the air in the house starts to warm up, and the air is going to continue to increase until it hits 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going to go 66, 67, 68, and then this feedback loop will shut off because homeostasis has been restored. So you have a second feedback loop that occurs when your home heating system or your room temperature goes above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So the variable's the same, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. If we kind of look back at this example, you can see that, okay, when the output was sent by the control center, it turns the radiator on, which is the effector, and it causes the room to heat up. So the room's going to go 66, 67, 68, and it might even go to 69 degrees or 70 degrees. So that's the new stimulus, that the room temperature is too warm. So the receptor is going to detect this. It's going to send input to the control center. The control center interprets this information. It sends output to the effector, and the effector is the radiators again. And the instructions or the output is to turn the radiators off because the room is too hot now. So the radiator shuts off. So here we go, heats off. And the air temperature goes from 79 to 69 to 68. When it gets to 68, this feedback loop shuts off again. So this is a constant on, off, all day long to maintain that set temperature or that variable of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And this works very similar. This is how feedback loops work in your body as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a little bit. So if we look a little bit more in detail about negative feedback mechanisms, this is an example of, it's actually two feedback loops that show how your body controls body temperature. So the goal of all negative feedback mechanisms is to prevent sudden severe changes. So negative feedback loops are constantly working every minute of the day to maintain homeostasis. So here's what we're looking to maintain. This is normal body temperature, which is about 98 degrees Fahrenheit, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If it dips below that, so say your body temperature drops, you're going to have receptors that are found in your skin and in your brain. They're going to detect this stimulus. The stimulus is that your body temperature has dropped and you're cold. So it's going to send this input via the afferent pathway to the control center. The control center is a thermoregulatory center in the brain, and it's going to interpret this information. It's going to say, hey, we're not maintaining 98.6, we're cold. So it's going to send output via the efferent pathway to the effectors. And in this example, the effectors is going to be your skeletal muscle. So the response is you start shivering and your body temperature is going to increase. So your body temperature is going to continue to increase. So it's going to say it was at 97, and it's going to get to 98. And then this part of the feedback loop shuts off. So now you have a separate feedback loop that controls your body temperature when it becomes activated when your body temperature increases. So the same thing, the same variable, you're looking to maintain 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. When your body temperature increases above that, so say you start running to catch the bus or you have to run to your car because you're late to work or something, your body temperature increases. The same receptors detect this. They're going to send input via the afferent pathway to the control center, which is the thermoregulatory center in the brain. And then the control center interprets this information, says, oh, the body temperature is too high. We have to cool the body down. So it's going to send output via the efferent pathway to the effectors. In this case, the effectors are sweat glands. So the sweat glands become activated, and the response is you're producing more sweat. This causes evaporation on your skin and of the sweat, and your body temperature drops. So it goes from like 100 to 99, and then it gets to 98.6, and then this feedback loop shuts down. One more thing about negative feedback loops. As I said, their goal is the same, to prevent sudden severe changes within the body. You have hundreds of negative feedback loops that work every minute of the day to maintain homeostasis. You have one that regulates body temperature, regulates heart rate, blood pressure, etc. So we're going to take a look at the positive feedback mechanisms now. Positive feedback mechanisms are, they control infrequent events that do not require continuous adjustment. So what you want to think about with a positive feedback mechanism is that the results of the response is going to enhance or exaggerate the original stimulus so that the activity is accelerated. You want to think about, once the positive feedback mechanism is initiated, it stays on until the goal is accomplished. If you remember when we were talking about negative, it's kind of a negative feedback mechanisms. It's on, off all day long to regulate homeostasis, or to maintain homeostasis. Positive feedback mechanisms are different. Once they're initiated or started, the cycle stays on. The mechanism stays on until the goal is accomplished. The two best examples of a positive feedback mechanism is blood clotting, which you see here. The other is labor contractions. Another way to think about positive feedback mechanisms is that they're self-perpetuating. Oops, let me spell that correctly. So they keep going once they're initiated until the end result is achieved. Okay, so let's take a look at this positive feedback mechanism of blood clotting. So here you have a break in the blood vessel wall, and the blood seeps out. So your blood is made up of plasma, which is a liquid part, but it also contains white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. Platelets are responsible for blood clotting. So once you have damage to the blood vessel wall, there's going to be chemicals that are going to be released by the damaged cells, and they're going to activate this positive feedback mechanism. So the platelets that are found in the blood, they are going to become sticky, and they're going to stick to the wall of the damaged blood vessel, and then they're going to release a chemical. So this chemical signals other platelets to come to the site. So then more platelets come to the site, they become sticky, they release chemicals, and more platelets come to the site and they become sticky and release chemicals, and more platelets come to the site and they become sticky and release chemicals. So it just keeps going round and around. Once it's started, it moves on until the ultimate goal, which is, what you're looking to do here in this example is to form a platelet plug. So you plug up the damaged blood vessel wall so that then repair can occur. So the important thing to remember about positive feedback mechanism is that once the initial cycle or the initial activity or the mechanism is started or initiated, then it's just on until the ultimate goal is accomplished or reached.